Welcome to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast, empowering you to take a whole person approach to your well-being, spirit, soul, and body. Join me, your host, Dr. Lara, naturopathic doctor, entrepreneur, and a servant of Jesus Christ. We are not just a body, we are spirit and soul. It's time to integrate medicine and spirituality into our healing. Let's get started. Welcome back to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lara, and we are welcoming back Ms. Jackie Brewton. We're going to be talking and continuing with the last segment on speaking to your teens about sex. This is going to be more of a guide to parents on what to do before you start having that conversation. So welcome back, Jackie.
Thank you. I enjoyed the last conversation, so I'm looking forward to this one too.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that we're going to get right into the conversation with this segment, because one of the questions that I get from parents a lot, because I believe in prevention in every area of life. So how soon, or what's the right age, or even maturity, appropriateness of when to start having conversations with our children, and how do you suggest approaching, having those conversations early on with children? Not just about sex, but relationships and love and what's safe, what's not.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because one of the things that you talked about earlier is, I'll tell you that you talked about the book that I have for parents called The 7 Things to Know Before Having the Talk. And when I titled that book, I thought, you know what, that's kind of a misnomer, because there's no such thing as the talk. Like, there's no one talk. Like, it should be a continuous conversation. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that parents make is waiting until a certain age and then like springing on them, we're going to have the sex talk, versus starting with age appropriate conversations at a young age about relationships, love, friendships, because I just think the basis of any relationship should be a friendship. And I think part of the reason why teenagers end up with so much drama in their relationships that probably shouldn't even be taking place to start with is because they start out in a relationship versus being friends with people. Like, I ask the girls in the class all the time, why do you have to put a title on it? Just be friends. Why do you have to put a title on it? But I think you can start out, number one, about what's appropriate and what's inappropriate as far as your boundaries, your personal boundaries. And that can be, kids who are, toddlers even, but this is appropriate, this isn't appropriate. Especially with the amount of like molestation that happens with kids. Yes. What does real love look like? And we don't even have to talk about romantic love, but if we can talk about what does love look like when they're younger, all the way through elementary school, then when you get ready to talk about it in relation to a romantic relationship, you've already built the foundation of this can't be love if someone's asking you to do something that's not what's best for you. And so it's not as hard of a sale for your child when you're trying to convince them not to have sex, because you have been showing them all along what love is like. One of the things I remember once interviewing a dad, and he said the way bank tellers can recognize counterfeit money is they make them study real money. And by the time a counterfeit bill comes along, they recognize it right away because they've spent so much time studying what real money looks like. And I think that applies to relationships. If kids are shown what real love looks like, by the time somebody comes along and says, if you love me, you would do this, they already know that that's not what love looks like. Like, real love is unconditional. You shouldn't have to do anything in order for somebody to love you or to show your love to somebody. And so I think that's one of the biggest issues, is that parents wait and have a conversation about sex when it should be respect, boundaries, love. What does selfish look like? How can you tell when somebody respects you? Because they respect your decisions. not just your decision not to have sex, but if they want to hold your hand and you don't want to hold their hand, they don't respect you. And I think we oftentimes miss out a lot by not having those foundational conversations and then want to talk about sex. And the kid gets freaked out. Like,
Yep.
ew, this is
It,
awkward. This is awkward.
yeah. I'll tell you, as a mother and as a daughter who was raised that way, but also as a clinician, as a physician, right? Because I work with, pediatrics. And so when, as early as moms bring in their newborns baby to do their well child's visits, there's a time I start having these conversations, just like you said, where we do need to start early on with boundaries. Because if you don't want your child to fall a victim of molestation or rape, because one of the statistics show that the number one people who are the aggressors are oftentimes people who are family and friends, people who are you're close by. And so
Absolutely.
these are things that we need to know as parents so that that you're aware of that and you're having those conversations at age appropriate and start saying, this is our body and, respect our body and no one has to touch you. I've gone as far as telling my girls when they were small, to let them know if an adult ever tells you, don't tell mommy, or threatens you or things that are going to threaten me, like don't fall for those tactics. Like we already know the tactics that people do to groom and set these young children up. So I would have these conversations of no one touches, your body. If anyone touches you or makes you feel uncomfortable, even if they get close to you, you have the right to get away or tell them to get away. I don't care if it's the principal, if it's your teacher, if it's an uncle, if it's a family member or a friend, if it's a child, it doesn't matter who it is. Like I really believe that if from a very young age we give the child empowerment to make decisions on their own, they know that mommy's not going to get mad if they run off or kick someone and run off, and then they come and tell me. We really want to start that conversation very early on and have that open door policy where we're making ourselves available, we're checking in, we're the adults. We have to initiate those conversations and educate them and let them know that we are safe to come to us no matter what's going on in their world. Even if they make a mistake, like, I want to know. And so to parents, I tell the parents all the time, somehow you have to verbally starts with verbally telling your child that there's nothing that they need to do to earn your love. There's nothing they have to do. And there's nothing that they will do to lose the love. You love them no matter what. And when children hear this and it gets engraved in their mind and in their soul, they know this. So I remember my daughter was in kindergarten and one of her classmates took her over to like a room where they had crafts and they took little clay things and the little girl gave them to my daughter. She's like, hey, take this. And, as parents, we have to be very in tune. Moms, we are all the time. But when I picked her up, something was off. And I said, what's going on? She's nothing. And so we get home and I know something happened. And I'm like, what? She then decided to tell me without me asking again. She says, Mom, I have something to tell you. I'm like, what's going on? And she said, I went to this room and this little girl gave me these clay things and we stole them. And she said, I feel very bad. And she's like, but I have the solution. She's in kindergarten. She'll have the solution. I want to talk to my teacher tomorrow, give them back to her, and apologize because I took them.
Oh, wow.
So she identified at such a young age that she made a mistake and she came up with a solution. But what I was most impressed about was that she was able to express that to me.
Right.
That means she felt safe. She knew I wasn't going to lash out in anger. And I said, it's okay. We all make mistakes. We all do things sometimes that we shouldn't. But now you learn from it. And so just the same way this little girl influenced you to take these things, just know that you're going to come across these situations when you get older. So you need to learn to speak up. And so you need to make almost all of these experiences a teaching opportunity, right? To teach them. But yeah, start the conversation as early on. That's age appropriate. But I know there isn't like a right, there isn't a right time to just get in there. Like you said, it is something you slowly have to start talking about. But I feel that as they get closer to like the preteens, like parents really get flustered when it comes to having that conversation. So I'm sure like your guide would be a great resource for them to turn to, or even you have some content like ebook, like e-courses on your site that people can
Yeah, I
turn
have
to.
courses on the site too, but one of the things I say is there needs to be a conversation before they go to middle school, because you think about from fifth grade to sixth grade, which I'm assuming that's when middle school happens
Yeah,
in most areas. Now they're going to be around older kids. And so they're going to be exposed to an older group that are making, that group's making other choices. So I say this is what I always say, you have it before you need it. And it's best to have the conversation before they start having these crushes in a relationship, because then it's just a conversation in general and it's not about a particular person. If a parent waits to have a conversation until after their child has started dating, now they think you just don't like the person they're dating. Versus if you had this conversation before they ever got in a relationship, they can accept it and receive it a whole lot easier, because it's just in general and it's not, they don't think you're just talking about them and their
right.
relationship.
Yeah. And the other thing too, that why I agree with you completely on that, it should happen before entering middle school. Because keep in mind, before hormones are changing, believe it or not, this is a point where they're actually a little bit more logical that you can get through them. Because once they start going through puberty and those hormones start increasing and shifting, it starts to affect their emotional regulation and all of these things. It gets a little cloudy in there, and so then trying to get through them could be very difficult. But yeah, so having that conversation before they get into middle school, especially like relationships when they're 4, and really prepping them up, right? Like saying, hey, you know what, you're going to see other girls and boys that I always say it's natural to have a crush, to like people.
Yeah.
It's okay to like the boy. It's okay to like that girl. But you don't have to like be fully committed to a relationship. You're still
Yeah.
young. So your job is to develop friendships, like you mentioned, develop the friendships, learn how communication works. You're learning that part of life. And so until you're older, to then enter a relationship. My mom always used to tell me, when you enter a relationship, it's because you're entering that relationship with the intention of getting married. And so if this person is not someone you see yourself getting married to, then don't date them. And that to me, just like for me, it might not work for everyone else, but for me, that made logical sense. Even as a young girl, like, yeah, that's true. Why would just because I like him doesn't mean I should date him. I could like him from a distance. I could have the crush. There's nothing wrong with that. Right?
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
many of them are dating people that they don't really know their character.
Yeah. That's the
Because
other
it's
thing.
it's all it's all based on physical attraction, and it's like, oh, they're cute, or oh, this person is so fine, and they don't know their character, so they're often dating somebody that they would never want to be a parent to their child in the future. And so I'm like, why would you waste your time with somebody? This is one thing that I tell students all the time is I say, who most of y'all are dating? Your future ex.
Oh,
I say, because you're either going to marry him or break up with them. And as a teenager, the chances are much, much greater that you're going to break up than you're going to, marry him. So,
what do you see in terms of like family dynamics within, so there's going to be different family dynamics. Like what is the difference with seeing like a single family household versus having two parents, or even like having, the full family of the parents and having like more of the Christian, upbringing? Because I want to talk about these things because I feel like in the Christian community, these are the same problems.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so, like, how it's just overwhelming sometimes to think about it. But let's talk about first about, like, I guess, the family dynamics of like, having two parents versus, a single parent. Is the risk for young people to be involved in relationships and being sexual higher in a single parent household, or is it just, hey, it really is, it's equal because it's always going to go back to the communication that parents are having with their young?
I'll start by saying kids get what they need from both parents. And what I found increasingly is that even when both parents are in the home, if one is a silent parent, it's the same as them not being there. They can be physically present, but not emotionally engaged, and there's the same void. High school boys tell me, they say, Miss Jackie, every girl I've had sex with had daddy issues. And I say, what do you mean by that? And they say either she didn't have a good relationship with her father or her father wasn't there. And she was expecting me to make up for something she didn't get from her father, which was give her validation and acceptance. And I'll tell you, one of the most common things I read in girls' letters is the reason I had sex because he was the first guy who made me feel special.
Yeah.
And in a healthy society, that would have been her father. But because we don't live in a healthy society, now we have girls who often run in the arms of guys, expecting a guy to do something that's not his job, and he couldn't fulfill even if he wanted to. Like, the void is still going to be there. But I also believe that fathers who are, because so many of the boys tell me that they were encouraged to lose their virginities by their fathers or other adult males in their lives, coaches. Like, what's wrong with you? You're scared of girls? You haven't had sex yet? And so I just think this parents don't understand how much influence they have by their presence and their absence, and by what they're saying and what they're not saying. So it is very, very important for both parents to be a part of the conversation. And when either one is missing, whether it's they're a single parent, it's a dad raising a daughter or a son without the mom, or a mom without, there's going to be a void that's not being filled. They have to be intentional about getting that void filled with other people in the community, whether it's a cousin, an uncle, or somebody, person of faith, somebody in the church. If it's a single mom, then especially if she has a son, because they need a man to speak into them, to teach them how to be a man. So it's like, of course you have to be careful and make sure it's somebody that's safe, but you need to make sure that void is being filled as much as possible if it's a single parent situation.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you, oftentimes happens in other areas where there have been a lot of divorce in the family. Girls can be very jaded about, I don't even want to get married because my parents got divorced. My dad cheated on my mom. I don't trust guys. I don't, so or my mom's been married 3 times, or my dad's been married 3 times. And so I don't believe in marriage. I just like they say, so much more is caught than taught. And I just don't think parents always understand the role model that they can be for their kids. And I know things happen and divorces happen for different reasons, but I think there needs to be a conversation with the child about, don't give up on the institution of marriage just because you didn't see it work with, your dad and I, or your mom and I. And I think without those conversations happening, then you have kids who are jaded and thinking it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah. And I think the problem with, parents who, because I've had these conversations mostly with women who, did go through several divorces, didn't make the best decisions in relationships. And they feel like they're not the appropriate person to have that conversation with their daughter because they messed up. And so I always have to encourage them and like, no, let's heal through that and remove the shame of you didn't get it right, because who taught you? Who spoke into you? Nobody. So you have the experience, and this is where you need to reflect and grow and develop yourself. And at the same time that you're raising yourself up, you're speaking life into your children and teaching them from firsthand experience of, look, I fail, and just being honest and vulnerable, depending on the age of the person, of the youth, right? If they're 10 versus they're 16, they're able to comprehend a little bit more, but just be, appropriate at their age level. I mean, if they're watching porn, I mean, you can't really ruin the conversation of saying, hey, look, I made a mistake of entering relationships too young. I didn't understand what relationships were about. And these are the things I made. These are the mistakes I made. Learn from them. I wasn't perfect, but I would like to lay the foundation for you to grow from that so that you don't make the same mistakes I've made. So I always think that parents need to not feel ashamed. Take responsibility and ownership, but don't carry the shame as a heavy burden on you that you feel it's a block for you to have a conversation with your children, because they could be learning from your mistakes. And what better way for... Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, what a better way for them to learn than from their parents' mistakes.
And I'll tell you when I see this play out the most is a mom who was a teen mom. And she comes to me and she says, I don't feel like I can have this conversation with my daughter about not having sex when she's a teenager, because she knows I did, because she was born to me when I was a teenager. And what I say to that mom is, when you tell your child, and then they say, because I feel like a hypocrite.
Yeah.
And I said, when you tell your child, don't do as I do, that's a hypocrite. When you tell your child, don't do as I did, that's a teacher. And I said, you can't allow any past choices that you made that might not have been good choices to handicap you and keep you from being able to have those same conversations. And for whatever reason, it seems like sex is the only area where parents feel this shame and inability to have a conversation if they didn't make the right choice in that area. So
right, because there's so many other things that we've made mistakes and that we don't stay stuck in the place of shame. So because we're on that topic, I want to transition into bringing God into the conversation, because this is where I say that a lot of people, if they don't have a relationship with God and they don't read their Bibles, they don't understand what's in there, then this is where the enemy is going to come in. And I see a lot of the shame. The enemy will keep you in that bondage of shame and guilt, and like you're not the right person to talk to your kid about this conversation. And I can share so many stories of situations where I see continuously the attack on families, and on children, because 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds should not be exposed to pornography online. They just shouldn't. And it happens. And it's happening, and they're on platforms and they're watching things that are geared for young people, for children. And there's always something there subliminally. So let's transition into the importance of how important is it for parents to raise up a child, having a relationship with God, because that's really the ultimate relationship of love, right? That's our first love. Like, God loves us so much. And how do we incorporate that? Like, say there's someone watching or listening to this and they don't have a relationship with God. Like, what are some complications of not having that relationship that you see? And what are some things that parents can start making a change and an impact in their family?
Well, I mean, I think the root cause of so many poor choices is trying to fill a void that only God can fill.
Amen.
And sex is no different than any other choice. I mean, some people try to fill the void with sex, with drugs, with alcohol, with food, but it's this void. I have to read you. And interesting that you got to this point, because I left this letter that a high school junior girl wrote me. And she says, from the time we were born, we were taught to chase the momentary satisfaction. We were taught to find the largest high to fulfill our greatest lows. And for me, that was sex. I gained my ultimate satisfaction from the opinion of man. It wasn't until I discovered that a righteous, pure, just man died for me that I found my true value and worth, Jesus Christ. Now I no longer have to chase the momentary satisfaction because I found a permanent one. Thank you for planting a seed in all of our lives, Miss Jackie. What you do matters. It takes someone like you to inspire others and lead them to the answer to their quest for worthiness, Christ.
Amen.
I was so impressed when I read this
Yeah.
letter from a student. Um,
I always say that the ultimate work that we do, whether it's you mentoring, guiding these young people, or a doctor, or whatever kind of a teacher, is really that as believers of Jesus, that we are all we're doing is we're pointing to the way. He is the way. That is the way. And that's all we're doing is pointing them in that direction. And that's my hope for this podcast, for the work that I do. And I know the work that you do is that people have this connection with God and have this relationship with God. And they become informed because this knowledge, God's wisdom, is what's going to help you get through in life in the most difficult times, right? And there is way more to life than sex. This is just an act. And without love, without having that connection as a relation, in a good relationship, it's always toxic. It really is. I don't know of anyone who can say honestly, sincerely from their soul that they're happy being promiscuous. Jackie, I've had actually male patients in their 40s and 50s and older share how they regret it being promiscuous when they were younger. And no one ever talked to them about the soul ties, right? The emotional complications, the physical, like all of the complications that would come of their actions. And when I asked them, what do you think kept you like just seeking women after women? Because it sounds like this is what you wanted during that time. And he said they were trying to fill the void of wanting to connect with someone. They wanted deep connection. And so they almost like desensitize themselves from really having connection, because it was just one after another, and they were just moving along. So I see this problem still being prevalent in Christian teens. Now, if they're going to church and they know God, and sometimes, people say, I grew up in a Pentecostal church, I grew up in a Baptist church, and we went to church and we did all these things and we knew. I think they did all the things, but did they know God? And how do we really bring children into the space that they develop a relationship with God themselves, not just go through the activities of church?
yeah, because you're right. I can't tell you how many letters I have from Christian teens who are in public schools who write me letters and they're sexually active. And, they'll say, I've been heard all my life that I shouldn't have sex, because it's in the Bible, but I just thought just because something's in a book doesn't mean that I should follow that rule, or nobody expects us to follow some imaginary friend in the sky, because for them, that is what church looks like for them. Is it's just this imaginary friend in the sky, or nobody's really taught them about, they haven't been discipled, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And they haven't been taught about a real relationship, and it's not just about religion, it's about having a relationship. And so I think, finding a good church with a good youth group that focuses on helping kids have a relationship, finding other like-minded, peers. Because when they're in a public school or they're out with it, it's really tough to stand out and stand up for what you believe is right. I read that in the letters all the time, and they start to, if it's not really deep down in them,
yeah,
they give up on it.
they do.
I don't care how much they've been taught, but they also, this is another area where more is caught than taught. Like, what are the parents modeling?
I agree
Like, you
with
can't
you.
just rely on a youth group. You can't
Yeah.
just rely on a youth group. It has to happen in the home as well.
So I believe in the last conversation we were talking about like the peer pressure that parents face, because as a mom, my child does go to a public school, but I'm just different. I get that. I am very determined, set, and I raise my girls very, very much the same way. Like, you have to have these desires. You have to know who you are in this world and not let the world tell you who you are. And so, when it comes to parenting a child that is in this age group, there's so much influence from what these other parents want to do,
Yeah.
or they want, like you said earlier, like they're going to go see this movie. And I am the parent asking, who's the parent? What are they watching? And it's like a flat out no. And the other thing I did as a mom that I truly believe it was like Holy Spirit just got into me in that moment. It was, my daughter was 9 years old and she danced competitively since she was 5. She was dancing. She still does. And so I remember a lot of the girls in her school, a dance studio, they were going to do some things. And here's the thing that this is just me. No one has to believe me or agree with me, but I don't believe in giving our young children so much freedom at such a young age. I don't believe in that. I don't let my kids sleep at anyone's house. I have a really hard time with that. I just can't, because I've heard the numerous stories, even from when I was in my 20s, of people that were molested and raped while spending the night at someone, or they saw, that was their introduction to pornography because they accidentally saw someone seeing it in the home. And I'm like, no. So before I even had kids, I was already thinking about all these things and convincing myself to not have kids out of that fear. But my daughter was 9 years old and they were going to go to the state fair or something like that. And I didn't have time to go. So I was not going to let them go with these other little group of girls. And some of them were a little bit older than her. So I understood that influence. And I remember I got down on my knees and I looked at her right in the eyes. And I said, baby girl, I need you to listen to me, okay? And I said, there are some things that you are not going to agree with me, and you might not like me. There's going to be, moving forward into your life, there's going to be times that you're probably going to even hate me, and you're not going to be in agreement when I tell you no. But here's the thing. I said, you know, mommy loves you, right? She's like, yeah, mommy, I know you do. I said, I love you. I would give you a kidney if you needed a kidney. Like, I would give my life for you. I stopped my career to stay home with her. Like, I love this little girl so much. And so I told her, I love you so much. And there's nothing you need to do to earn it. And there's nothing you can do to lose my love. But I said, but here's what I'm going to need you to learn to do. You're going to need to learn to trust me when I say no to you. Because there's some things that your little brain does not understand in this big world that I do. And there's some things I cannot share with you right now at this age. And I will as you get older. And you will start to see things for yourself. And as these things start to happen, you're going to be like, my mom told me about this. And look, it's happening. So I just need you to trust me in this. We could do something fun. What do you want to do? We could do something else. But I'm not okay with you going for 4 or 5 hours with people that I really don't know. You think you know them because you see them every day, but you really don't know them. I know enough to know what their core values are, and they don't align with mine. I'm comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable having these conversations with my children or with other parents. Because at the end of the day, I know that God entrusted me and my husband with these children, right? God entrusted parents with these children, and it is our responsibility not just for their physical well-being, not just for their mental and emotional well-being, but what is going to happen to their soul? What is the spiritual component? And I feel like this is one that a lot of people shy away because maybe they didn't have the education, right, the upbringing in that. So what are some ways that parents can start to bringing in the spiritual component and explaining it to their children? Because I really ultimately think it's our responsibility. It's great if the church has it there, but ultimately it's my responsibility. Because let's be honest, humans are humans, they're not perfect. And there's imperfect people in churches. And we hear, whether it's a Catholic church or a Christian church or that church, there's always things that happen there too, where people who are still hurt from their wounds haven't healed, and they impose harm on children sexually or in some other ways. And so ultimately, right, we are the parent. We are responsible to prepare these children in all of these environments, right?
So before I get to that, I have to go back to something you said because I absolutely love it. Like, I love the fact that you are that parent. First of all, I love how you had the conversation with your daughter about trusting you at such a young age. But there is, and then when you talked about you're the parent that doesn't let her spend the night at somebody else's house, and for all the reasons, I started asking 8th grade girls in the class, how will you parent differently? And then I started asking co-ed high school students. And one of the things that a young lady said in the class is she said, I'm never going to let my child go to somebody else's house when I don't know the parents. And every time they tell me what they're going to do different, I know there's a backstory. And so I said, why is that? And she said, I have gone to my friends' houses and saw things that I should have never seen. I have heard things that I should have never heard. And she said, when I have kids, I'm never allowing my kids to go to somebody else's house. I remember my sister would never let my niece spend the night at anybody else's house all the way through high school. My niece did not understand it. She would get upset with my sister. And, all my friends think you're horrible, blah, 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 blah. And I sat down with my niece and I told her about all the stories that I have read and heard of students who got molested at a sleepover by an older brother, by the stepdad, by the whatever, or things that happen. And I said, your mom is here to protect you, and your mom doesn't know the values of those people. And my niece understood it. When I finally explained it to her, she got it. And when the interesting thing is people at my sister's church told my sister that she was overbearing and too protective. And when your daughter goes away to college, she's going to go buck wild because you're so protective and you won't allow her to do this. You won't allow. And I think secretly some of them were wishing that she would,
It's terrible
just
that they would even wish that.
it sounds crazy. So my niece goes to college, graduates from college, gets married at 24. She's a virgin when she got married. And she said, kind of like you said about your parents, she's like, there were many situations in college that I could have gone the wrong way. And she said, I kept hearing her mom's voice and my voice, kind of like you said about your parents. Like that is what kept her. And so when parents think that if I put these boundaries and if I don't allow them to do this, if I don't tell them no about this, other parents are going to tell you, oh, they're going to go crazy when they get out on their own because you're too protective. I know too many cases where that has not been the case.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like my mom continuously had these conversations and things that happened, not to her, but in the family and so forth. And so I knew that she was coming from the place of love, right? And she wanted the best. I knew innately that she wanted the best for me. I also grew up in a big family. I'm number 8 of 9. So, she just really wanted the best for me. And I'll tell you, when I met my husband, I tell this story all the time. When I met my husband, I'm finally telling it in public because I tell it to people I know. When I met my husband, I was right out of high school. So I didn't date at all. I knew I did not want to have a boyfriend. I didn't want to have distractions. I was very focused on my academics. I had a goal. And so that's one of the things I encourage parents. Help your child find what they're so interested in and fascinated and they want to do, and help them focus on that, their energies on that. They can have friendships. They can do all that. But I knew I didn't want a boyfriend. So I got through high school, and right after I was in college, I met my husband. It was at a quinceañera, which is like a sweet 16 party. And I had actually no interest in going, but my brother invited me, and I decided to go. And that's where I met him. And so the next day, because that's when we would talk on the phone, right? We would talk. This is 1997. We talked on the phone the next day. He seemed like a very nice, respectful guy. And we talked on the phone the next day. And he asked me, Jackie, how many boyfriends have you had? And I told him none. He's like, yeah, right. I don't believe that a pretty girl like you hasn't had any boyfriends. I said, wait, hold on. I didn't say that the opportunities didn't present themselves. There's plenty of opportunities. I just knew I didn't want to have a boyfriend. And I said, and since we're on that conversation, let me just tell you this. I need you to know who I am. Okay? I said, I do not drink. I don't do drugs. I don't party. And I don't have sex. So if those are any of the things that you think, if these are things that you do or that you think that you're going to want me to do with you, this is a good time to just stop the conversation. And there was this dead silence over the phone. I wish I would have told him that in person. But there was a dead silence, and he said, wow. He said, I've never, ever had a girl tell me any of that. And I said, I know, I'm different. And so I told him, I know what I want to do in my life, and I don't want any distractions. And so I said, so we could be friends. And you're right. A guy who loves you, who really loves you, is going to respect your choices. And he did. We were friends for over a year, and then we dated, and he was always talking about getting married. I'm like, man, you don't even know what love is. And so then we would have these conversations on what is love to you and what is love to me, and have that dialogue. And then, we ended up getting married. We've been married for 21 years. We have our 2 daughters, and life is not perfect. But, one of the things that I can tell you and that I teach my oldest, my youngest is 7. We're not there yet. But with my oldest that I have had the conversation with her is like, honey, I have no regrets. There's not one man or woman, apparently these times, that can say anything negative about me, how maybe I was inappropriate sexually or whatever. There's no one that can say anything that dishonors me. And I said, and that, for me, I can't speak for everyone else, but for me, that gives me a lot of peace in my soul. And so having worked with women and men who have had just turbulent times in their life and the decisions they made, I see the implications on their physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual well-being. And there's God is the Redeemer of all, and He will forgive and He will heal all. But if people don't make that relationship with God, if they don't turn to the way, then it makes it very difficult for them to forgive themselves, because they feel like, I can't forgive myself. I just can't let that go. I was a terrible person. But so only God can bring that deep healing, that people really need. Jackie, this has been an amazing conversation. Okay.
I didn't answer the question that you asked me. I kind of went off on a tangent. But I just think one of the things for parents, as far as the relationship with God, is oftentimes I've heard kids say that even when they were serving God, they were doing it out of fear, because, it was like the negative of, if you don't, this is what will happen to you, versus out of a positive of, these are the benefits of having a relationship with God. And, I think it's how you present it to the child. But like I said, you start at a very, very, very young age and talk about, like, this, nobody else is going to fill that void. And you can try with a whole bunch of things, but nothing's going to fill that void.
I agree.
You're going to always.
I agree. I even say, as much as I love my natural medicine that I do and therapies, even that can never fill the void. It can never. So we need to have that divine connection and relationship with the one who created us, right? Which is God. So Jackie, this conversation has been amazing. I really appreciate you, and may God continue to bless you in the work that you do and the many lives that you're touching, and may He grant you your heart's desires, that you live a long and happy life, and that He always fills you with His light, because you are a beacon of light in this world, and we need more Jackies to share such real profound, teachings to our young people. So if people are interested, I'm going to put your access to your social media, your website, all of the goodies, access to all the books on there and descriptions on there. Would you say the best place for parents to start is to get that ebook, that guide for them?
Yes, that would be the best place.
Or just get them all 3, guys. It's not that expensive. You spend more money at Starbucks. Just go get the books that are there, on the 2 books. And I'm going to be putting links on there to get your information out. Jackie, thank you so much for your time for these 2 episodes that we've recorded. And I hope that people really, take a lot of value from it. And if they have any questions, they can reach out to me, reach out to you, or comment on the section of these videos. And thank you so much for your time. And to our audience, thank you for joining us on this difficult conversation, but very, very needed in our time. I hope you've taken a lot of great value from it. And as always, until next time, be blessed. Thank you for listening to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. If you like what you've heard, please like, share, and subscribe. Help this message reach more people who may need to hear it. Leave your comments. I want to know what you think. If you're interested in learning more about Raices, visit our website at raicesndmedcenter.com. Until next time, be blessed.